So we are going to start with the second part for today. We're talking about transnational solidarity networks. Today, we have with us Yanira Arias from Alias Americas. The specific topic that she is going to talk about are legal networks of protection in the United States. Yanira is part of the team of Alias Americas since August of 2014 in response to the need of facing the arrest and stigmatization of thousands of children who are Central Americans together with their families arrested in the southern border of the United States. She's an activist for the rights of vulnerable people, the LGBT, unaccompanied children in different parts of the United States, and she is from El Salvador. At present, thanks to technology, she can be with us today, but physically she's in Puerto Rico, where she decided to go to live in these last few years. We envy you, Yanira. And without anything else to say, I would like to give the floor to you. This is a great session, and I think it's worthwhile, out of respect of all the people who are here in Spanish and in English, to start talking about what you have to say. Thank you very much for being with us. It's an honor that you are with us. It's the second or third year that she has been with us, and really, Alias Americas is one of the civil organizations, as well as ACLU, that works more for the rights of people who are immigrants in the region. Alias Americas, Yanira will tell you, but it's an organization that does not only work in the United States. It has a very important... and they serve their communities. So I give you back the floor, and go ahead, Yanira. Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for your dedication, because this is a journey that is intense. So I applaud your commitment, because you want to participate in this diplomado. We are participating because we understand it is an effort that is very rich for strengthening the knowledges that we all have. And it's nice year after year to collaborate with Iniciativa Ciudadana, or Citizens Initiative. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about who is Alias Americas. Alias Americas, we are what? We are an organization that is made up by people that are immigrants. All the organizations that, all the people that are here have come from several places in the Americas. And we are the only organization in charge of establishing the links of public policy between or among the regions where we come from and the policies implemented in the United States. And we use Alias America as a platform or a bridge that will generate the conversations that will help us understand better how the interaction throughout the hemisphere with the United States, etc., should be made or must be made in a more equitable, democratic way, just like your organization here. This is very important when we want to change or make new policies of different nature, of several different natures, both of health policies or economic policies. And so we understand that even if we migrate to different parts of the world, beyond the United States, or when we migrate inside of our own countries, we are displaced to other places, and we always have influence in the places where we are born through the economic contributions or remittances, and also because our dear ones continue receiving in our countries, and mainly because we understand we have a commitment with the land that saw us be born, with regard to the fact that the conditions that pushed us to migrate are special, and we want to look for suggestions or solutions that will tell from the voices of the civil society and not from the voice of the government only, to have something more balanced. We have them, and our working area include, as I mentioned before, the part, or we are rather quite concerned to educate with regard to the impact there is when we do not have economic justice. We care to see the impact of racism, and also how the economic justice as well as racism are connected to immigration policies. And there are some populations which are more vulnerable to the lack of economic justice, more vulnerable to racism, to the inhumane immigration policies, among them the children, families that looking for shelter, people from the LGBT communities, indigenous people, people that are descendant of Africans. I think integrating all these type of things helps us understand better why a family is forced to leave its country. Now, what we see in the means of communication, especially in the United States, what is more predominant in the rhetoric of hate is the rhetoric of hate, and instead of educating about the reasons why a minor or a woman who's looking for shelter because of problems with its gender, or a person that is looking for protection because of the persecution due to his or her identity, are not heard by everybody. The criminalization of the poor people, or the people who are workers, and the criminalization of immigrants from the hemisphere in the Americas. So please, you tell me if I'm speaking too fast or not. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. Well, like I mentioned, there are moments. Right now, we are the only organization, and our executive director, many years, he had an experience in the organizational field in public policies, and mainly in the field of activists of human rights. So the solution to the big problems that we face in our area cannot be disconnected from establishing these dialogues, including the great big country, Mexico, which also has to be part of these conversations to find solutions and to guarantee that any country of transit will guarantee in a worthy way the displacement or immigration in a way that is protected through the rights and give opportunities for each immigrant. We believe that it is difficult to find change. 14 years before Alias America existed, some of the people that started associating to the network were asking themselves, why do we need to travel to the region if we want to change what is happening with immigration policies in the United States? Why do we have to go to the United States? We have to change, if we want to change what is happening in Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico. The answer is because the lack of information, because many policies are being formulated without really knowing deep down the lack of equality, and because many times in those voices, the decision makers have a lot of power, and they do this for their own benefit, to get richer or to go on exercising power in the region, in the area. So we are in the 15th year, so we are going to keep you informed of when we will celebrate our 15-year birthday. We will invite you to our party. 15 years after, we can say it was worthwhile. I mean, all the conversations being generated were worthwhile. There's a better understanding. It's not only us as Alias America who rise the need to talk about why people are being forced to go out. Because, for example, in El Salvador, we have 90% of our waters contaminated because most of the people who throw away garbage in them are women. Why? Before it were only men, then the families, and now even minors unaccompanied.
I think this is the result of rhetorical processes and wrong communication in the region. And this is why it is very important that you who are participating at this certificate course, that you add solid background, because there are people who work with you in order to take care of migrants. But of course, we need to have an impact on how decision makers are going to do. And what do we do? Well, actually, what we do are four things. And this has really worked. First of all, we have educational delegations from the U.S. to Mexico and Central America, and from Mexico and Central America to the U.S. For instance, my boss, who has recently finished 2 delegations. So with one of them, we had the opportunity of monitoring human rights between Guatemala and Mexico, the border we have there, and also what we have in the state of Massachusetts, in order to see the people who are going to be turned back. So actually, we need to see what we are going to do in Honduras, El Salvador, and Honduras and Guatemala. Salvador's decision, how do we interpret these delegations? Well, we use blogs and actually some other types of publications that help us to share this information. And now this has happened in the 20th and 21st centuries, because we have digital and internet communication. And also we need to train leaders. So we think that all the actions we implement as Alias Americas will allow us to strengthen and to give voice to the people. We also think that we do not have a response for everything, and we cannot protect everybody. So this is why we have to work together as some other organizations, for instance, with Iniciativa Ciudadana, as I said, and with some other organizations in Central America and North and South America, and this allows this platform to be enhanced, and vice versa. We always are shared by Naya, a new tool, and we always share with Alias Americas all this in order for them to really have the benefits of all this in order to make the correct implementation. We do think that diplomacy can bring about changes basically when we see when we exert the necessary pressure and when we knock at the correct doors. Decision makers are very important, we think, and therefore we do not only want to really share all these testimonials, but to make changes in policies. Well, are we okay for the interpretation we will make? And before starting, what I am going to tell you about the effect what we have not been able to measure, what the human impact is of current policies against migrants. And as you saw at the beginning, I added some terms to my presentation: terrorize, torture. And in Alias Americas, we have been perfecting all this in order to see what type of action, what type of policies we have to make reference to, because actually they are torturing people. They are torturing migrants, not only in the migration route, but in arrest centers, detention centers. And when they are released, they are subject to torture, not torture as we had in medieval times, but torture, psychological, emotional torture. The fact of separating a person from the other one, a person who is a relative, an important relative, or really depriving a person and being detained in a center, in a women's center. This is why I started with these terms, and I start with the term torture. Well, torture is the infliction of severe physical or pain, mental pain or suffering for a purpose such as extracting information, coercing a confession, or inflicting punishment committed by a public official or other person exercising comparable power and authority. And not only during this administration, actually when I read the bibliography, I included what took place in 2014. This is an inheritance of President Obama. Family detention centers, not only at this time, because migration laws have been in effect for the last 30 years, and they are still being implemented. So we are going to work with the presidency and Clinton administration. One of the most severe laws for immigrants is thanks to this tools made by Clinton and Obama, found the resources to identify this migration inflow of people who are looking for asylum and were really fleeing from violent situations. They wanted them to repent, to have a bad experience in order for them to never try it again. So actually, these detention centers were open for boys and girls and for some other people. So actually, this type of action is inherited by the Trump administration, and this is perfected by some other type of resources. They think they have amparas or habeas corpus. And, I would like to mention some specific measures he has used. But the main message has always been this, and actually, if they are treated badly, they will never be back again. This is what they try to do. And this is related to torture when we speak about inhuman experiences of migrants because they are exposed at these detention centers. The previous presenter was speaking about this. And there was an absence of health services, mental health services, and everything that is really inflicted on a person. In a person, for instance, if they cannot turn the lights off, if they cannot have a bed, and obviously this brings about suffering and imbalance and anxiousness. So as I've told you, this is torture. One other term I want you to have present during this conversation is xenophobia. Originally, the word comes from the Greek xenos, meaning the stranger, and the guest, and phobos, meaning fear. Thus, xenophobia stands for the following: fear of the stranger. And usually this term has really been taken to hate or hatred of strangers, and therefore this is an attitudinal orientation of hostility against non-natives in a given population. So here we speak about history, inheritance, heritage in the Americas. As to the treatment given to the people who do not belong to our country. And this is a feeling that has brought about that there are divisions among sister countries. And when people arrive at the U.S., people know much better what is the impact xenophobia has, and terror, of course. It is important we cannot speak about traumas, xenophobia, and terror. And this implies what I am sharing with you is that this is the most extreme degree of fear, of terror, in order to really hostilize a population. Terror is committed by a person, or you are terrified because you are in extreme panic. Terrorism, for instance, what we hear about in the news, and very many terrorific messages that come from the White House is coercion. And I want to speak again about coercion because what I told you before as to the logic of a very rigoristic behavior, of course, people are convinced, but really terrifying them of not going back to the United States ever. So before going to the next part, I would like to check with ASDET. Everything is working more than fine. Thank you very much, Anita. Well, taking into account that we're speaking about xenophobia, terror, and torture, let's make a quick review I don't want to tell you that with this, we are having technical difficulties. We cannot hear the last part. Due to a specific reason, this tells you about the consistent impact of the institution at the U.S. of terror, terrifying and traumatizing people who are not U.S. citizens. And since this has become a method to deprive them of human and legal rights, we need to see what the experience was of Native Americans who lived in the North American region, the part called today the U.S. At that time, one of the strategies colonizers used in order to subdue and coerce adults, indigenous or Indians, in order for them to be subject to the European power, was by really harnessing their children, both boys and girls, in order for them to really deliver their lands. But there was also one other objective, to really harness and to control boys and girls, because if this was feasible, if they were able to control the innocence, the heritage of Indians, definitely they could control way over genocides and to actually to deprive them from all this, because they were depriving them from their beliefs, from their condition, and these children had already been educated to relate themselves to Mother Earth, and actually the understanding children have or had about a community, their own language, and the way they were dressed. And they found that really separating them from their parents and really putting them in some schools just to teach them English was a strategy in order to dominate them. So fathers and mothers who resisted were taken to prison, and the family was destroyed because the family members were arrested. There was power control, and in all these types of schools, children were deprived from their clothes. They had a haircut in order to look more European, and this really is a lot, because if you compel an Indian to have a haircut, this is against their beliefs, and also to speak in a different language. Actually, this has a very specific purpose, to control all these Latin American communities until their lands were stolen. And the fight Native American peoples are still having in order to preserve what is theirs. One other example I would like to give you is the consistent use of torture, terrorism, and xenophobia in the States. And this is the treatment given to African children in the slave trade. As you know, thousands and thousands of families were forcefully taken from the African country in order for them to provide free labor and to really enhance the military, economic, and political trade in Europe. And they went through the Atlantic and the Caribbean for very many months, and they deported on board of ships. And children were separated from their parents or the people who took care of them. And this is why very high mortality rates took place. Very many diseases afflicted them because nobody took care of them, nor nurtured or protected them. And during these transatlantic trips, very many of them died.
The next example I would like to bring to the table is, which is more recent. My T-shirt, I don't know if you can see it. I forgot I was wearing it, but it's an executive order, the Executive Order 1966, which was in the times of President Roosevelt of the United States, when they went to war, World War II. There was an attack to one of the bases in Hawaii by the Japanese army, and the answer of the United States was, in order to stop migrant Japanese people who lived in the United States, and were in the United States, was that to avoid people from damaging the rest of the country, as it happened in Hawaii then, they were going to take them away, take them to spaces where they were not going to hurt anyone or could not hurt anyone. This is called as the actions of the Japanese internment. Here we're talking about Japanese origin persons and even people or daughters born in the United States, in the west of the United States, talking about California, in states where there was a forced displacement of the families. In this case, the displacement involved I couldn't hear the message, sorry. The families some families had different social, economic levels. There were workers, people who didn't have money, and there were people who had lots of resources. There were doctors or worked in private companies, and they had a very comfortable life. Several of those who were forcefully displaced, but most of them had industries or family businesses like the shoemaker or the owner of a small restaurant, or industries that were a little bit bigger. Or like I mentioned before, doctors. Overnight, the executive order was signed, the one that I mentioned before, and they are given 24 hours I mean, the families were given 24 hours to grab all their properties in just one suitcase per person, and they had to go out immediately out of the United States, and they were taken in buses to very faraway areas, specifically deserted areas, where they built houses. Don't imagine something elegant with a patio, a bathroom, and a kitchen, or whatever. It was just a place, a big place, where they used to put 3 or 4 families to live together, and they forced them to be immediately residing there. These were areas that where there were thousands of people in parts of the West. These places are very warm in the summer and very cold in the winter, because temperature changes to freezing in the winter. So they sent the children over there. Schools were built for them. The adults had to work, not for a salary, for a worthy salary. They had to work to maintain the communities that were forcefully created. And of course, these situations of crowding and changing life from one center to another in a drastic way started having lots of